This is Mick Foley.
This is Harley Race.
This is Shelton Benjamin.
This is Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff.
This is the Monster Abyss.
And this is Daniel Bryan.
This is JBL, and you're watching the MWF.
Be there live.
Wrestling fans, welcome back to the May edition of MWF Extra. I'm Dan Marotti. What a loaded month we have here as the countdown is on to the big live event MWF Road to the Gold 2007, Saturday, June the 16th at the Arlington Memorial Ice Rink in Arlington, Massachusetts to benefit the Rec Center. Over 1,000 kids' youth programs. And who else is going to be there but the MWF officials? Have brought in WWE superstar Rikishi, a man that's held 4 championships in that organization, and there might even be a little bit of dancing that night. Paul Bearer isn't happy, and neither is his trifecta, and it's going to lead to a hostile environment in Arlington. But right now we have a special guest, one of my favorite guests that we've ever had on the program, a man that has done it all literally in professional wrestling, the one and only Les Thatcher. Les, thank you for joining us tonight on Extra.
Well, thanks for having me, Dan, and happy Mother's Day to you.
Well,
or I guess to your mother through you. How's that?
Sounds good. And back at you, Les.
You were just mentioning Paul. Has Paul Bearer been at your place recently?
Paul Bearer is always up to no good in the Millennium Wrestling Federation. As you know, he's been leading the MWF Heavyweight Champion, sudden Impact Dylan Cage for a long time now. His other boys, Jimmy Jack Cash and the undefeated Danny Jacks, have caused nothing but mayhem. And he isn't very happy that Rikishi is headed to the MWF to try and steal the spotlight a little bit.
Well, you know what? I'm going down to his school in Mobile the 1st of June.
Oh, down at the Gulf South Wrestling Organization.
Yeah, we're doing a 3-day camp Friday night and all day Saturday and Sunday. Open to all independents. In fact, if if somebody happens to be listening to the show is interested, they can hook up with Paul Bearer at GulfSouthWrestling.com to sign up, and always happy to have the young guys come in and hope we can teach them something.
Well, there's nobody better than doing that than Les Thatcher. And, professionally we might disagree an awful lot. Paul Bearer, he's just an evil, ruthless individual. Some of the things he's done here in the MWF alone are reprehensible, I should say. Never mind some of his actions in the WWF. But what a mind that man has for the wrestling business. He's just...
Yeah, he really does. A lot of the managers have tremendously fertile minds. I mean, guys who actually have never worked matches. Jimmy Cornette is of the guys currently breathing in this industry is one of the best minds for storylines and that sort of thing, angles, and Paulie. I've always said it, if I owned a big corporation, if I could keep those two guys from each other's throats, I'd make them my writers, my bookers.
Two great minds indeed. ECW, Smoky Mountain Wrestling was Jim Cornette's promotion, and it was a wrestling fans type promotion as opposed to
and I'll tell you, a gentleman who's passed away a number of years ago, but I think if he were still alive, would be involved with WWE in some capacity with storylines would be Ernie Roth, the Grand Wizard. He had a very fertile mind and was very close to Vince Jr. Years ago, but again, it's and of course, I guess that's why these guys are managers. They weren't physically cut out toward athletically, so they turned to the managing end of it, and a lot of them ended up in the offices.
Sure, and they're smart individuals. They go out there and they send out their bread and butter to make their money, and they don't even have to take one bump. It's quite a deal, and as you've seen over the years, most of the managers in the professional ranks are usually sleazebags. Les, are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, I thought we lost you for a minute there.
No, I'm enthralled with what you're telling me.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you, Les. I don't get that very much. Usually I get the cold shoulder from the female in my life, but that's a different story for a different time.
No.
Les, right now, since you're such a man that has given so much to the sport, you've played a hand in some of the careers of some of the greats right now that you see on WWE and TNA every week. What do you think about the next generation of professional wrestling right now? It's something we talk about an awful lot here in the MWF, and I personally feel it's a scary time where you've done so much of it at a much higher level than I have. What are your thoughts?
Well, you know what, I think right now, one of the things, and I've had this conversation for several weeks with different people off and on, is, well, strangely enough, the first time I had the opportunity just a few weeks back to see Deep South Wrestling, I was down at some relatives in North Carolina and picked it up on Comcast Sports Channel one Saturday night, just channel surfing. It was up late, and so anyway, I was able to watch it, and I told my wife the next day. I said, Deep South is the best independent television show I've seen, and the reason I said that was there were one of the kids from up around your way, Kofi Kingston,
sure,
and Sean Osborne from the started with us in the HWA, and Chrissy Vane, who I had a chance to work with in several camps out of North Carolina. Anyway, I got a chance to see those kids, and I had seen they had made improvement. And I mentioned to my wife, I said I thought that that show was a combination, a good balance of entertainment and professional wrestling, and the kids were getting some match time, 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes lengths of matches where, and that's what it takes actually to learn. In ring is to spend time in there. And that was on the, I'm trying to think it was over the weekend of the 21st to 22nd, and we had left home the morning of the 18th, and I had no idea that the plug had been pulled on Deep South on the 18th until I got home on the 23rd and happened to go out on the internet. I'd been away from the computer and found out that they were no longer affiliated with WWE. But anyway, that's taken a long way around to get to the point I'm trying to make. Is I think that that the developmental system in WWE has got to sit back and take a long look and how it's handled. I think from what I see on Ohio Valley. Now, before let me say this to start with. Danny Davis, who is one of the owners of Ohio Valley, and a guy who trained Brock Lesnar and John Cena and on and on and on and on. Is a capable trainer. There's no two ways about it. And Al Snow, who's also down there. These guys can turn out talent. But what I'm seeing is apparently the mother company is saying, let's teach them more entertainment and characters and, doing goofy skits than actually in ring. And I think that's putting the cart before the horse, especially now that it seems that WWE is going more to, some solid wrestling, as was witnessed a few weeks ago with the Cena-Michaels hour match that they put on, which was a tremendous match, the best one I'd seen Cena have. And while we're talking about John, he's a local boy from up your way, too.
Absolutely.
But anyway, I think that's it's relevant that they open up, instead of 1 or 2 camps, they probably 3, 4, or 5, because it's a numbers game. Let's use the NFL as an example. They just had their draft. How many hundreds of kids were drafted by the 28 NFL teams, and how many will actually stick and make an impact over the next few years in professional football? Very few. And that's going to be the same way with professional wrestling. I started training guys in '93, and I'm not sure, I never kept count, but I'd be hard-pressed to say how many hundreds of kids that have gone through my camps and have been involved with me since '93 up to current that didn't make it for whatever reason, athletically, mentally, whatever, work ethic. So it's a numbers game. Plus, I think instead of cutting guys like Rob Conway loose or Too Cold Scorpio, these guys could be utilized in the developmental systems to work with the younger guys who are the trainees on the shows and in the training camps. Because here's the deal. If you and I have been in this business 6 months, a year, year and a half, and we are wrestling each other constantly, we can't learn as much as we can from somebody who's already been to the dance, who's got 7, 8, 9, 10 years behind them and understands what's going on. And that's how my generation actually, each time I changed territories as a young man, it was like going to a new school and getting an opportunity to wrestle with the veterans. And I think that's the biggest problem I see now. In the independents, it's so many kids are, when I say self-trained, more, watch tapes, they work with one another, and again, when you're at the same level, it's hard to designate, we've made a mistake, or this is the wrong way. A lot of times when I do these camps and talk to these kids, it's not that they don't want to do it right, they don't know that they're doing it wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that, I think the future, especially with WWE, I think where they also need to put more faith in their trainers and let the trainers have more input in terms of when somebody's ready to come up. You and I were talking baseball before we started on the air. It's the same thing with the minor league system. The Cincinnati Reds general manager here where I live, he obviously talks a lot to the coaches and the managers in the minor league system, along with watching a ball player before they decide whether he's ready to come up to the parent club or not. And I think that's because a writer sees a kid and the kid has a good look, and the writer says, "Well, I've got a great idea for him." That doesn't mean he's ready.
Right. Exactly.
And as you've seen over the last few years, they'll bring guys up, and they're not given any time. Let's look at Edge this past Friday night when he won the title, on SmackDown from Taker. I was thinking then, Adam Copeland, I remember hearing about him back in the 90s. I had a couple kids from Canada in here, and they were telling me about this young guy who they thought had a great future. And my first shot at working with him was after he'd already signed with WWE and had become Edge, and he had come in and do a couple shows for me here. But I was just thinking, how many years has he been in the business? And he has now just reached his peak.
Exactly.
And they have taken a look at him, for 5 minutes like they're doing with some of these kids and said, well, he didn't connect with the fans, or he didn't get the character across. There's the biggest problem, I think, where the business has changed just in the last 10 years, is I think you've got to let the kids, the young athletes, put part of their own personality into a character. I can't give you a character, Dan, and force you to become that character if you're not comfortable with it, if it's not actually in part you. Dusty Rhodes was successful because he was being Dusty Rhodes, and Flair and Piper and Steamboat and on and on and on. These guys were successful because they were in part, a huge part of their character was them.
And those are usually the best ones.
There, is part of the problem. Plus, just to do, everybody can't be a character.
Right.
I think with Rob Conway, here's a guy I watched when he started, from the time he started with Danny Davis down in Ohio Valley. Rob's a great journeyman, and would be beneficial in teaching, if nothing else. Back in my era, he would have been a good mid-card journeyman. He would have had a job. He could have changed, worked different territories and still been productive and made a living. And now it's like, well, he was harnessed with a fringe sympathizer gimmick, which I think was, bound to fail before it even started.
Right.
I don't, but that's the other thing too. I think your gimmicks are designated to mid and lower card currently, with the exception of the odd, like the Undertaker or Kane, who can who work their way up to the top. But if you start, but guys like that are instrumental in helping train people. And looking at Edge, how long did it take him to mature as a performer? And I think with the match we saw with he and Orton a week or so ago, it was Adam, carrying the thing, calling the match, and I think and that comes with time, and it only comes with time, and it only comes with working with guys at a higher level where you've got to arise to the occasion, and I think there is the major problem with the independent system across the board.
The independent system right now, it's just, before they even get to the dance with WWE developmental, the training system right now, with most of these schools putting out unprofessional wrestlers on unprofessional events, it's just basically pissing on the business, and this is the proverbial next generation of what's to come, and it's turned into a nightmare, and I don't know how it became unprofessional wrestling. I don't know if it was the internet era when anyone could rent a ring or find a little building.
It's like this, if you've got the money and tomorrow morning you get out of bed and decide that you want to be a wrestling promoter, you can buy a ring, come up with a logo, get a website, and be in business before it gets dark tomorrow night.
Right.
And that doesn't mean you know a thing about it. It's just that, hey, I've got a few extra bucks. I think I'll be a wrestling promoter.
It's decimated. I mean, even independent wrestling.
Or to be a wrestler. There are and I know a lot of the guys from my generation, that are. I make a joke out of it. A lot of times when I'm introduced to kids in a camp, I'll say, to start this thing off, who here watches American Idol? And those who raise their hands, I say, well, I'm You know, I'm the bad guy on the judging panel. I'm Simon. You know, but somebody has to call a spade a spade. And I think the problem with the, you know, you take some promoters, they've got kids who they'll blow smoke and tell them they're this, they're that, they're the other thing, and they're not, simply to keep them in their system and working for them for whatever it is, gas money or, you know, or whatever the deal is. And again, you know, nobody's going to start out in this business today making a living. All the young independent guys, with the exception of a few, have got to have a job.
Yeah.
You know, when I started in Boston in 1960, I was able to make a living in this business, and was able to continue to make a living. And today that's just not possible, you know. But you also have, I mean, you know, there's got to be a bit of honesty. There's too many small. Here in Cincinnati, when I started training guys in '95 for another promotion, he and I had a difference in philosophies and about the business, and I won't go into that. But then, so in '95 is when I started HWA. At that time, with the exception of him and myself here, and OVW down in Louisville, that was pretty much it. Now, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 promotions in this, within a 50-mile radius here, there's 6 or 7 independent promotions. And it's just, it's a glut on the market, and of course, there's a lot of guys who really, you know, they're hobbyists, and a lot of they'll take exception to being called that, but that's exactly what they are. It's just like your dad or my dad going out and playing golf on the weekend. They're not going to go out and play in the PGA tournaments. They're amateurs, you know, and it's done once a week. And that's the other part, too, I think, Dan. You can't learn this business by wrestling once a week or training once a week or never training and wrestling a couple small shows, you know, during the month. You have, when I head to school, my guys were expected to be in the ring at least 3 or 4 times a week, or they didn't get to work on the shows. I mean, and I think that's from our generation. You know, my career ran from 1960 to 1980 in ring, and you know, we were wrestling 5, 6, sometimes 7 times a week. And that's what it takes. It's the repetition of doing it over and over until it becomes a part of you, until you don't have to think about it, you just react to it.
A lot of the guys, they don't have the passion to do that, Les, and I think that's a huge part of the problem right now. There are too many unprofessionals out there. You know,
and I see guys, you know, that I don't see you come to. I still do once a week with HWA on Wednesday nights, and there's guys that I know are on their TV that don't show up over there, and I'll say, "What's up with that?" Well, you know, this and this and this. Do you plan to go someplace in this business? If not, then that's fine. Then what you're doing is what you're doing, and you'll be doing it 10 years from now. But if you plan on going someplace, you've got to put the time in. Flair became Flair by doing it 5 or 6 times a week. You know, or the same with, you know, again, with any of the tops, the Funks, the Briscoes, you know, we can go, the Anderson brothers, you can, on and on and on and on, you know, but it's, well, you know, one example I use with a lot of kids is if you go to Las Vegas and watch the dancers in the shows, in the stage shows, they perform probably 2 or 3 shows an evening. But the next day at noon or 1 o'clock, if you go into that showroom, you'll see them in there practicing the same routine they just did the night before 2 or 3 times. Because that's what it takes to be good. Tom Brady is going to camp with the Patriots. He's won 3 Super Bowls. He's been an All-Pro. And yet, guess what? He's going to practice just like the rookies are when it comes time in August. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that. Because you can't sit home and stay sharp. You just can't. And you can't get sharp by sitting home. And there's the biggest problem, I think, with a lot of the independent kids. Well, I've got a pair of boots, and I had my first match, so obviously I'm a pro.
Right. And, you know, I really get angry with that train of thought in a lot of ways, but it really boils down to the trainer, you know. In the wrestling proverbial schools, I don't even think they are schools. They're just, it's like romper room. And I mean, these kids don't know any better when they're forking their money over. They're trying to get it done for as cheap as possible to live their dream, but they don't realize that they're slapping the business across the face. When these shows take place, they're insulting the fans, and 99% of the fans out there right now are just general fans, and they don't know the difference between any of these independents. So when these garbage events take place, you're not just hurting the fans in attendance that night, they're never going to go back and support any non-WWE WWE type event again.
Right, exactly. Well, years ago when there were territories, 99% of these independents wouldn't be in business.
Right.
They would be called outlaws, and the big promotions would send their policemen, their tough guys over to buy a front row ticket and challenge your champion. But the other point is, I know a lot of the kids that started with me back in '95 when these other little small fly-by-nighters popped up, and why are you upset about that? Well, it's if ABC Backyard Promotion rents the Armory in Podunk, Ohio, and runs a bad show, and somebody spent $10 to see it, and then XYZ goes in and does the same thing, and people are disappointed with what they get for their money. Well, I don't have a television show. I may have a better product, but I don't have a way of getting that across, and all these people see is my poster or my newspaper advertisement, and I'm just another small wrestling promotion with 3 initials.
Right.
And, so they don't know if I'm any better or not. And by this time, they maybe aren't going to waste $10 to find out.
Exactly.
That's, and it's to me, whether I look at it this way, I've had hobbies, but I'm a competitive nature. I was born that way. And to me, whatever it is I'm going to do it the best I know how. I'm going to be the best I can be, which doesn't mean I'm number one, but I'm going to be the best I can be. And I tell a lot of kids, I say, don't dig in and work hard for me or Vince McMahon or God or your mother. Look in the mirror and do it for that guy you see staring back at. Do it for your personal pride. I don't want to go out there and look like a fool in front of 50 people or 50,000. And I can't imagine why anybody else wants to,
That's just the bottom line is there are too many people that proclaim they're in professional wrestling right now. It would be benefiting the industry much more if they just bought a ticket and watched the shows.
Yeah. Well, and the other, too, a lot of kids, they think they're going to get I see some of the independent TVs. They think that bad comedy covers up for lack of talent, wrestling talent. Well, it doesn't. It just accentuates it, if anything. And that's the other thing, too. At the independent level, this is your minor leagues, if it were baseball, or it's your continental league, if it were pro basketball. This is where you're supposed to learn the foundation, and to me, I'm not adverse to the independents doing, a percentage of what we call now entertainment, but doing a lot of goofy skits that, they don't have the production that WWE or TNA's got. They obviously don't have the talent.
Right.
So they come across as, isn't that cute? Little Danny Jr.'s pretending to be so-and-so. And it's like Halloween. You're dressed up, acting like you're so and so.
Exactly.
And you're not getting the foundation. You're not learning the psychology. And that's what, going back to the WWE developmental. I think trying to teach these guys characters and promos before they can even walk and chew gum at the same time. Once the bell rings, is putting the cart before the horse. It's it's crawl, walk, and run. And you've got to have that wrestling foundation. We're talking about Edge, and he can have the coolest look and the greatest promos and do really cool skits. But once the bell rings, if he can't deliver in there, what's going to happen when Shawn Michaels and Finlay and Regal and Benoit and Edge now, who has become a veteran who can carry a match and elevate guys. When these guys aren't around any longer, what happens at that point?
It's scary to think about it. They have 3 full-time promotions right now on national television. They only have 1 developmental. There's a huge problem with that. I know they're looking for a building in Tampa now, and right.
Steve Kern is going to come off the road. And Steve's old school. But then, that's the other thing, too. You've got to let the coaches be the coaches. If I hire you to win my team a World Series, then the smart thing for me to do is to let you do what you do, instead of trying to control what you do. And that's one of the things when I was in the WWE system that I saw a lot of times. The trainers from myself or Danny and Jimmy would say, "Well, we don't think this guy's quite ready." Well, they pull the guy up. Well, they might prove us wrong. And then again, they might prove us right. That's to be determined. It's like some of these kids who are drafted in football. They had this outstanding college career, but maybe that was where they plateaued.
Right.
They may not be able to take the next step. But also, you can't tell it in 5 minutes or 5 days. You know, it's like I said, Edge was given the opportunity to mature, to develop once he got to the WWE, and that's what you've got to allow these guys to do. You know, again, I think, was Rob Conway going to be a main eventer at WrestleMania? No. But he's a good, solid hand who can help teach, you know, your kids who are coming up. He can work with the Johnny Nitros when they're green, or MVP, or MVP. Here's a kid who's developing, and why? For the most part, because he's been married to Benoit
for months, right?
You know, obviously he's able to learn. Obviously he takes instruction well. Obviously he leads. He's easy to lead, and he learns from it. I mean, you know, you can take the same Benoit and put him with somebody who doesn't have those traits, and of course he can't teach this guy if it takes him 10. You know, he's got him for 10 years. But that it's for MVP to have been put with somebody at his experience level, he wouldn't be, you know, progressing as quickly. And that's where Lashley now, which is to say Bobby Lashley, it's not to say Lashley's not, he has improved, but not at the rate that MVP has. You know, so it's, and which doesn't say Lashley won't, but that's the other thing too, Dan. You can't sit down and say, okay, I'm going to give you 6 months to learn this.
Right.
Because you can't be, I mean, you can be casting somebody aside that's going to turn out to be a great talent for you. I've had some very good, solid independent kids, I mean, who are good on the independent circuit, who didn't have the size to go any farther, who came to me with no athletic background. You know, and it took them, well, I one kid it took 1.5 years before he had his first match, but he worked hard. He dumped a lot of excess weight. He learned the business, and it turned into a good hand. And, you know, but he just didn't have the height, you know, to make it on, you know, in the big leagues.
Right.
But that doesn't mean he, you know, when he came to me, he told, you know, he's 21 years old at the time, had no athletic background. He said, I want to try this. Can I do it? I said, I don't know. Let's see. I said, if you're willing to work at it, I'm willing to work with you. And, you know, and it was 1.5 years before he had his first match. But he turned into a good, you know, a good worker for us, and, you know, helped me on my cards for a lot of years, and then he quit to go to college and so forth. But anyway, the point I'm getting at, you know, you can't set a time limit on somebody's development either.
Right. It'd be like a Major League Baseball. You know, the Major League team calls up someone from AAA after 1 year in the minor leagues and says, okay, we're going to bat you fourth, and we want 40 home runs per year and 120 RBIs, and have you bat 310. I mean, you just can't do it. Right now,
well,
WWE...
You and I were talking about this Josh Hamilton here with Cincinnati. Who had the drug problems, the alcohol problems, and hadn't played ball in the minor leagues in a while. And but you know, finally got some minor league experience last year. They brought him up at spring training, and he's up and he's been playing good baseball. He's you know, 8 home runs, about 18 RBIs, and hitting in the high 200s, and like he belongs here. You know, now is that going to happen with everybody? Absolutely not. But you know, that doesn't mean if he hadn't have stuck, that he couldn't have you know, been brought back and you know, and turned into a great major leaguer with a little more seasoning. I think that's the biggest problem is these kids are thrown to the wolves, as it were. And here's a gimmick that you're not comfortable with. We're going to stick you out there. Oops, you didn't get over the firing.
Right.
Wait a minute. You know, they haven't even had an opportunity. You know.
Yep. And it happens.
Again, going back to Edge, how many years did it take him to hit his peak? You know, he's probably one of the best heels in the business currently, and has been for the last couple of years. But he didn't walk in the door that way.
Right. It took time.
You know?
And you look at it right now, there's more active wrestlers in WWE than they even have in developmental. Could you imagine a Major League sports franchise in that predicament? It's insane.
Yeah, you know, and in terms of depth, they don't have that right now either. I mean, there's less solid, experienced workers, you know, on the roster. Then, you know, more guys, more young guys, you know, and that, which is a good thing for this current generation, is you know, there's a lot of young guys getting an opportunity. But of course, that's it too. You've got to step up to it. You know, once the ball's put in your hand, you got to be able to carry it.
Right, and at the same time, you have TNA, and they don't have anything.
Well, you know what? The sad thing, I think TNA is just, and I think I'm among the majority when you say that it's just they're not. You know, the storylines are kind of goofy, hokey. They've got good talent. I'll tell you what I'm looking forward to, as we both know, Ring of Honor taped their first pay-per-view at Manhattan Center last night. And, two of my kids are on that show, Nigel McGuinness and B.J. Whitmer, who both, neither one had their first match in any short period of time. You know, it took them a while, but they came out with a solid foundation under them. But anyway, I'm looking forward to, I think, Ring of Honor. I don't think it's, first of all, Kerry and Gabe aren't going to compete with the big companies. That's not their niche, and they understand that. They've come along slowly. But I think they're going to offer more what a lot of the fans have turned away from, is they're not inured with the entertainment that they're being offered in TNA or WWE. You know, so I think Ring of Honor is going to be that alternative that TNA should have been. Yeah. TNA's got a lot of good talent. It's just not, I don't think, utilized properly tonight on the pay-per-view. I think, you know, instead of putting Tiger Mask in a 9-man, I'm so tired of seeing these multi-man.
How many exactly? How many 3-ways and 4-ways can you have?
Yeah, well, you know, I just think back the first three-way dance that ECW did with Shane and Terry Funk and Sabu. And it was talk of the industry, right?
Yep.
And now they have 2 or 3 a night. Well, and WWE's gone crazy with handicap matches, which to me, handicap match, if you stop and look at it, the psychology of it, the babyface is insane for taking the match.
Right.
Why did Rob Van Dam accept that after seeing what happened to Lashley? Is he just stupid? Yes. I mean, you know, in storyline vein, yes, he is. You know, it's like Clint Eastwood walking into a den of outlaws without a gun.
Right.
But, you know, to me, when I saw Tiger Mask, and I said, why don't you just put him and Jerry Lynn out there, give them 20 minutes, and let them roll. Because they can go out there and have one hell of a match.
Right.
You know?
It would be,
you know, which is now somebody told me, and they didn't tell me who, but they've turned the Styles and Samoa Joe thing into a 3-way. Is that true? Do you know anything about that?
I didn't. I watched the television show last night, and they hadn't mentioned it. It was still advertised as a single.
I just heard that, and that may not be true. Maybe that's just a rumor too. But there's another match which could, you know, which could steal the show. But yeah, I mean, they've got great talent. I think it's just the way they're being utilized. I want a lot of storylines, Dan. It would have been tough for me as a booker 30 years ago to try and sell Dan shot his father and he's in a life-threatening coma, but he survived.
Right.
Today, it's just insane to try to sell that. It's the whole thing with Chris Harris and the blinding.
Oh, horrible. I'll tell you, Les.
Because the majority of the people that you're pitching this to realize our business is a work.
Yep.
But it's still our job to suspend your disbelief.